This lesson covers an introduction to the concepts of persuasive writing. Persuasive writing is writing that presents information and supports claims or arguments. It tries to convince the audience to agree with the author's point of view or to take a certain course of action. This is still a formal writing, which means you need to use proper grammar, avoid using slang, contractions, etc. You should also use a formal essay writing structure. To be an effective persuasive writer, you need to take care to develop your argument completely. The reader needs to understand exactly what situation you're presenting them and what position you are on and why. That you present your supporting evidence logically. You need to avoid errors in logic, otherwise known as fallacies, which we will talk about in depth more later. You also need to keep your audience in mind at all points in time. To effectively persuade, you have to think about who you are persuading. Developing your arguments fully means you've explained all the relevant facts of the situation, you present sufficient sound evidence to support your point of view, which means credible evidence, and your sources are cited. You explain completely how your evidence proves your point, but you avoid being redundant. You need to present your evidence logically, which means you need to either start with your weakest argument, supporting point, and end with your strongest, or start with your strongest and end with your weakest. Which one you choose will depend upon your audience, but statistically and in terms of fluency, starting with your weakest and ending with your strongest seems to be the most effective. You avoid errors called fallacies. They're common occurrences in human communication, and they manifest in many forms. There are lots of different types of them. They might be an emotional one. You make an emotional argument instead of a logical argument. They might involve circular logic or other flaws in reasoning, wherein your argument and your support are pretty much the same thing. Or you could be factually flawed. You might be making an argument based upon a piece of information that is not accurate. We will again look at fallacies more in depth later, but for right now, you need to understand that these things called fallacies are errors in logic, and we don't want them in our persuasive writing, because they undermine the strength of your argument. Who you are trying to convince will directly affect how you will shape and word your argument. Consider, you want to go to a movie on Wednesday night. The movie starts at 9 p.m. If you were going to convince mom and dad to let you go, how would your argument differ from convincing a friend to go with you? Very similar actions, but the arguments would be completely different because your audiences are completely different. Persuasive writing can also be presented in many ways. You might have editorials. You might have advertisements, or critical reviews, or a letter to the editor, or an op-ed, an opinion piece. You might do a traditional essay. You may create propaganda. All of these forms might be just written. Some of them might also include or entirely be comprised of visual elements, like pictures. Persuasive writing can also be presented as a persuasive speech. You will be doing the following: writing an editorial, writing a book or movie review, and giving a persuasive speech. This is going to be the big overarching project. The other two you will be working on simultaneous to the big overarching project, but they won't be as in-depth or detailed as the speech itself. For right now, what you are going to do is complete the editorial writing assignment. You will receive the assignment sheet in class, and you should see that sheet for further information, including due dates and assignment requirements.